Today we're going to be talking about vertex form of quadratic functions. And we're going to start first with our vocab, and that is, what is vertex form? That is y equals a parentheses x minus h squared plus k. And we're going to explain what those pieces mean. You might actually recognize this kind of form because it should remind you of transformations. So if I look at this equation right here, I'm going to look at this negative sign, and remember what that tells me is that this is a reflection over the x-axis. And then remember, if I see this plus 2, that tells me it's actually moving left 2. And if I see this minus 3, that's telling me it's moving down 3. So I can compare that form to our vertex form. The biggest difference here is that I no longer have a g and an f. I have a y. So I'm no longer in function form. Instead, I have a y equals. And because I no longer have this f of x part, I now am going to have a squared, because the f of x up here told me to use my original function, which has the x squared incorporated into it. Since there is no original function in my vertex form, I have to have a squared so that I know that it's quadratic. So I'm going to kind of set that up. Instead of g of x, I write a y equals. And instead of having an f, I add a squared on my parentheses. Those are the big differences. So vertex form is actually called vertex form because it gives me the vertex, surprisingly enough. The vertex is actually written in the form of h, k. Now, let me talk a little bit more about these equations and the things I can spot from it. So I'm going to add this down to the front of my notes right here. If I give you the equation y equals a x minus h squared plus k, this is that vertex form. I'm going to tell you all the things that I can spot from this because it actually tells me a lot of information. I'm going to start first with that a value. That a value can tell me that it's a reflection, and that is if the a value is negative. It can also tell me if my parabola is narrower or wider. Remember, it is narrower if that a value is greater than 1, and it's wider if the number is between 0 and 1. That a value can also tell me if I'm dealing with a min or a max. If I'm dealing with a min, that is when my a value is a positive number. Because think about it, if my a value is a positive number, the parabola is opening up. But if my a value is a negative number, that's creating a max. Because when it's negative, remember, we know it's a reflection. So a reflection would have to open down, which will always create that max value. So A can tell us a lot. It tells us a reflection, it tells us narrow or wider, and it tells us a min or a max value. The H can tell me quite a few things as well. It can tell me if my parabola is shifting left. Remember, that is when I see a positive number there. Or if it's shifting right, and that is when I see a negative value there. It also gives me the x value of my vertex. Now, just like our graph shifts the opposite direction than we think when we think left and right, the same thing kind of happens with the x value of my vertex. It's opposite the value that it appears to be. Lastly, that h value can tell me my axis of symmetry. Remember, this is going to be x equals the x value of the vertex. So this is going to be x equals h. All right, and my last piece, my k, it can tell me if it moves up, remember that would be a plus a number there. If it moves down, we would have minus a number there. It also gives me the y value of the vertex. And remember, once I know the y value of the vertex, it gives me the min or max value, because that would be y equals that k value. So think these come together to come up with that vertex, which then helps me identify all the other key features as well, and I can identify all the transformations. So now we're going to practice taking our vertex form and identifying those key features. I'm going to start first with my vertex. Remember, it's an ordered pair. Remember, it is the h value and the k value. The one hard part to remember is that that h value changes sign. So it's not a -5, it's actually a +5. The k value always stays the same. And you can relate that again to when I think of the transformations, only the part that's inside that parentheses moves opposite the direction. Same kind of thing here. Only the part that's inside the parentheses changes sign for the vertex. Once I know vertex, I can figure out axis of symmetry. Remember, it is x equals the x value of the vertex. It's a min because we see this a value as positive. Remember, when that a value is positive, we know it's going to be open up, which automatically creates the minimum value. And it will be at the value of y equals -1. For a domain, remember, it's going to be extending to the left forever and the right forever. So that domain is all real numbers. And my range, because I have a minimum value at y is -1, we know my other y values have to be greater than or equal to -1. Let's try one more like that. Number 2, we're going to identify the key features. Start first with my vertex. So I'm going to pull the h and the k. Remember, the h changes sign. So instead of -1, it's a +1. The k does not. It stays +4. Because I know that, I can figure out my axis of symmetry must be x equals 1 because I have to use the x value of the vertex. I then look at my a value. Since my a value is negative, that tells me my parabola is reflected. It is opening down, which creates a max value. The max value is at y equals 4. We can see my graph is going to go forever to the left and the right, so that makes my domain all real numbers. And my range, since I have a max at y is 4, all my other y values have to be less than or equal to 4. Okay, the other type of problem you're going to see with vertex form is I'm going to give you the vertex and a point, and we want to come up with the vertex form. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to identify the pieces given my 2 points. So remember, vertex is always my h and my k. And then the other point is always going to be my x and my y. Now, the vertex is not always going to be listed first, so you can't just always pick your first ordered pair and say HK. You have to look for the word vertex and make sure that that one is the one that's labeled H and K. Now I'm going to start with our vertex form equation. I'm just copying the form down, and then I'm going to plug in the values that I know. So I know that y, I just said, was 5. I do not know a, so I'm going to leave a alone. X, I know, is 6, minus h, I know, is 3 squared, and k, I know, is 6. So now I have this equation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to simplify this equation. So I'm going to start first with my parentheses. and I'm going to do 6 minus 3. That is going to give me 3. Next, I'm going to take care of the exponent, and I'm going to square that. That is 9. Now, what this is saying is a times 9. Well, remember how I write that? I write that as 9a. Drop down my plus 6. Now I'm ready to solve this basic equation. I'm going to kind of come up here, give myself some more room. I'm going to subtract 6. That gives me negative 1 equals 9a. And then I would divide both sides by 9 to figure out that a must equal negative 1/9. Now, I am not done. I have to come back and write my equation. And the way I'm going to write it, I'm kind of setting up my format for you. I'm going to fill in those 3 blanks every time. So my a value goes in the first blank. I just figured out that my a value should be negative 1/9. My h value goes after that x minus, so that would be a 3. And my k value goes in the last blank. And since it's a positive 6, I'm going to put plus 6. There is my vertex form equation, and I am all finished. Let's try another one. Number 2. I'm going to start first by labeling my vertex. This one says vertex, so this has got to be my h and my k. The other point is my x and my y. I'm going to write out my vertex form equation. Then I'm going to plug in what I know. Y is negative 2.5. I do not know a. X is 4. Minus h is 3 squared, and k, see how it's a negative 2? I'm just going to replace that plus sign with a minus 2. All right, I'm ready to solve for a. I'm going to start first with parentheses. 4 minus 3 gives me a 1. Then I'm going to take care of my exponent. 1 squared is just 1. And remember, that's saying a times 1 squared. So that's 1a. And I don't really need to write a coefficient of 1, so I just drop it. Now I'm ready to finish solving. I'm going to add 2 to both sides. So I get that a is equal to negative 0.5. I'm not done. It wanted me to write a quadratic function in vertex form. So remember what I'm going to do. I'm going to create this equation with these 3 blanks, and I'm going to fill them in. A goes in the first blank, which is negative 0.5. H goes in the next blank, which is 3. And K goes in the last blank, which is negative 2. And I am all finished. We have 2 more like that, and we're done. Number 3, I'm going to start first with labeling my vertex and point. Vertex, remember, is my h and k. My other point is x and y. I'm going to write out my vertex form equation. And I'm going to plug in what I know. Y is 21. We don't know a. X is negative 3. H is negative 6. So look what happens here. We have minus a negative 6. Well, minus a negative turns to a plus. Now you can kind of see why that rule is where it changes sign. So it would change to a plus 6 even though the h value is negative 6. And my k value is a positive 3. Now we're ready to solve for a. We start with our parentheses. So I have negative 3 plus 6, which will give me 3. Then I'm ready to do my exponent of 3 squared, which gives me 9. Remember that's saying a times 9, so that is the same thing as 9a. Solving from here, I can subtract 3 from both sides. That gives me 18 equals 9a, and I can divide both sides by 9. I get a must equal 2. Now I have to write my equation. Every time it's going to be that same setup where I have 3 blanks I'm filling in. The a value is 2. The h value was -6. Now remember, minus a negative turns to plus. And my k value is +3. All right, one more. Number 4. Start by labeling your point. Vertex is H and K. Other point is X and Y. Plug it into my vertex form equation. Y is 30. A, I do not know. X is 7. Minus my H value of -1. Remember, minus a negative will turn to a plus. And K is negative, so I'm just going to say -2. We're ready to go from there. Simplify the parentheses. 7 plus 1 will give me 8. Then I'm ready to do my exponent. 8 squared is 64. Remember that saying a times 64, so I'm going to write that as 64a. Now I solve my equation. I'm going to add 2 to both sides. I get 32 equals to 64a. Divide by 64. And I find that a is equivalent to 1/2. Set up my equation. I have y equals my a value, which is going to be 1/2. My h value, which is a -1. Remember, minus negative turns to plus. And my k value of -2. So there is my vertex form equation. Now tomorrow we're going to add on to that, and we're going to take those equations and convert them back to standard form that we're used to working with.